Welcome to Matt's Play Games Top 10 Games of 2022.
Matt, welcome back.
It's good to be here.
Good to have you here. It's 2023. That means 2022 is done.
Yeah.
And we're here to talk about the top 10 games of the year, or our favorite at least.
As is tradition.
Yeah. This is fun.
Yeah.
We should do this more often.
Well, there's only
4 or 5 times a year, maybe.
Okay.
Just
It's only 1 year.
Constantly yeah, I guess that's a good point. Constantly evolving list. You gotta keep the people updated.
Best of the quarter.
Best of the quarter. Quarterly check-ins. Like taxes. Do your taxes, everyone.
Yeah.
Anyway, should we just get into it?
Let's do it.
What should be our thing that we do this year when we list off the names?
Say them in a normal voice.
It's boring as hell.
Well, if you want to do something else, then you can just do it.
Number 10, Dome Keeper.
Dome Keeper. So this is a game that is sort of like tower defense plus resource harvesting. Kind of has like 2 phases that keep repeating as you go along.
Yeah.
Pixel-based little indie game. I just bought it on a whim, and it's like a good time-wasty game. Like if you just want to kill like an hour or something, just load this up and futz around with it. I'd say the thing that drew me to it immediately was like I loved SteamWorld Dig 2 at least, and like the resource harvesting at least is like exactly like that.
Yeah.
But then you basically, go down. You're a little astronaut dude who can fly. You go and harvest resources and break bricks apart, and then you fly back up and like defend against waves of aliens trying to attack your dome.
Yeah.
Hence, you are the Dome Keeper.
You keep your dome safe while you search for a hidden object.
Yeah.
Underground.
So yeah, there's like goals of the thing. So like, there's 2 at least at the time of making this, because they're still updating it. There's like find the relic or whatever, and then there's like just try to prestige, like send enough resources home or whatever. And then there's also like different methods of defending your dome. Like there's the regular laser dome, and then there's like sword dome. But it's one of those things that like part of why I liked it was like it felt really like well balanced. Like there were a lot of times where like I'd have like a shitload of resources, and I'm like trying to pull them up, and like the more resources you're carrying, the slower your character goes.
Yeah.
And like there's a timer you can buy anyway that lets you see when the next wave is coming, and like I'd have like a couple seconds, and like, can I mine this block one more time before? And there's like an achievement for like getting in there with like 1 second to go before the wave starts.
I got that one.
Yeah. So it's just like, it was funny how often that scenario happened where you're down to the last second. I do think it could use more variety. Like,
yeah,
you're not a big Binding of Isaac guy, but obviously like Hades or other roguelikes that have like sort of synergies. There's really just like one kind of set upgrade path, and you can make choices on it based on like what you get from the mines or whatever, but it's generally like, get the double laser, get it maxed out in damage, and you'll just be in God mode.
Right. I did like that it had multiple, at least different defense weapons and ways. Like there's you can unlock a wizard version of the character who doesn't have a drill.
Yeah.
But they use like magic to create holes.
Yeah.
And like I like the upgrade. Like there's different upgrades you can find that will give you a different ability. Like you can create like an elevator. Or a portal that will help you get back and forth to the dome faster.
Yeah, the teleporter is good.
So I just wish there was kind of more. Like it felt like I was just not finding as many resources as I would like, so it was just sort of a little slower than I would have enjoyed for this kind of like run-based game.
Yeah. But
I did enjoy playing it for a few hours though.
Yeah. I put like 50 into it.
That's a lot more than me.
Which is well, I did platinum it. But anyway, check it out. Check it out, everybody. Let's talk about our number 9 game.
Number 9, Citizen Sleeper.
All right,
Matt, talk to me about it.
So Citizen Sleeper is a sort of role-playing game without combat, where basically each day based on your resources, you have a certain number of die rolls that are rolled right at the start of the day, and you use those dice to assign to different tasks that will help you progress different storylines, or feed yourself to stay alive, or like pay for things you need that will help you succeed. And like you play this sort of android, or like it's like your mind is copied from someone who was alive, but it was placed in a robot body, which is you, and you're stuck on this
like a replicant kind of.
Yeah, you're stuck on this space station and just trying to survive at first. But as you play longer, you sort of
you get tangled up in a bunch of
you get caught up in these different storylines, and you over time you become more successful at just staying alive, and then you get more invested in these different storylines, which often have the chance to give you an escape from the station, and you can either decide to leave or stay on the station and continue with the other storylines.
Yeah. I was like surprised by some of the multiple endings, because like I just like stumbled upon one, and it was like, all right, you can just end the game here if you want. Yeah, very cool like world building, like all of the little things that they set up, like you said, like the corporation that owns your body, like that's the big immediate threat, is like they have you like tracked and are gonna send people, because you're like a runaway. Yeah, they're gonna send people to try and get you back, because you're like
send
property
bounty hunters after you and stuff.
Yeah, and they do. And
and you can find there's multiple different ways to deal with that.
Yeah, I will say, like when it first started, I felt like, oh shit, like I gotta keep my resource, like I gotta really play it smart to like just stay alive. And then I don't want to immediately jump into criticisms, but like it became a little too easy for me to just like get by, because I was just like, boom, I got +1s to all my shit. I can roll whatever I want.
I mean, it takes a couple hours, I think, to get to that point. And
yeah, sure.
I think it's intentional that at first you're just trying to scrape by, but as you stay there, like you find maybe I can just live on this place. And
it's like, I mean, Disco Elysium was a kind of touch point. We were talking about this before. Similar game, that RPG style. This one, because you know what your dice roll is, you know what your outcome's gonna be. So like if you're
have
trying
a better
something,
idea of
yeah, sure. There's still percentages, but like a lot of time, like if you need to get something to go, you just do a 6 and make sure that it's like gonna succeed. Whereas Disco was still like, it felt a little more random to me. But similarly to Disco, like I actually recommended Disco Elysium to a lot of people who bounced off of it. So if you don't like this type of like RPG, like it's a lot of reading. Like there's no voice acting.
Yeah, I think the writing is really good.
Yes, it is.
But like it's really a game all about that. So
you have to understand, you have to be into that to like.
If you're interested in like a kind of sci-fi story that is about finding out who you are, and
it's very science fiction, but like also just like a little touch. Like it's not graphically that interesting, but like the little character designs and drawings and stuff are really well done. Like they have really cool style.
It's very simple presentation for just telling their story.
Yeah, very cyberpunky. And speaking of sci-fi, I guess, talk to me about, well, I'll talk about.
You talk about
Number 8.
Number 8, Signalis.
Signalis. Signalis?
I think that sounds better than Signalis.
Yeah, even though it's like kind of signal. Whatever.
Signalis.
Signalis is a science fiction survival horror game developed by like 2 people. And you know, obviously there's a lot of things about this game that are immediately appealing to me because I'm a survival horror fanboy who loves, you know, old Resident Evil and Silent Hill 2 in particular. And this game has very much wears its influences on its sleeve. There's like Silent Hill 2 references all over the goddamn place.
Yeah.
But what I really love about this game is the style. It's got a really good aesthetic.
Yeah, really cool. Like it mixes a pixelated look, and like it goes between third-person scenes and first-person scenes.
Yeah. It has that. I mean, for some reason, I follow like horror game accounts and shit. Like the Horror Gamist, I think it's called Horror Gamist Visuals is the Twitter account. And there seems to be a significant overlap between like horror game fans and people who love the PS1 aesthetic for some reason.
Well, I think PS1 was just a really big era for
horror games.
Like, yeah, just
that's like when they kind of people realized, oh, you can make video games like this.
Yeah.
But yeah, so it's got that, like you said, pixelated, like low resolution, but still polygonal, and just like all the little like user interface things that they do, like this like sort of ghosting they have on UI shit is like very, like I'm impressed with this like 2-person team to be able to come up with very kind of advanced and stylized graphics like that. And also, I mean, like I said, the save points are like these red things on the wall that like
very Silent Hill.
play like a scream sound. Like it sounds exactly like Silent Hill 2 in a way that, like, I don't know, on some offense it's like you could come up with something more original, but at the same time it made me smile when it happened.
It's definitely made for people who are fans of survival horror games.
Yes. And even like there's a scene halfway through sort of that is like sort of a carbon copy of something from Ghost in the Shell. So that's like obviously another big influence on the game.
It has we haven't really mentioned the sci-fi setting, but
sure, yeah.
It takes place
describe the story.
I mean, it's
if you can.
It's like a far future. It might be. I think it's like basically the future of like an Earth colony that went out into space. Like they found this other solar system, and like there's this empire that you're not a part of, but you're still part of this other planetary government that's like super hardline, controlling people, fascist.
Yeah. A lot of fascist vibes.
Like the game has an inventory limit of 6 items, and you learn very early on, like there you find like a poster where it explains that this is actually like a policy, like to avoid materialism. Like you're only allowed to carry 6 items on your person at any time.
Yeah.
And that's just, I guess it's just hardwired into because you play like a replicant again.
Right. You play a replicant, you're looking for a Gestalt, which is basically like, as I understood it, a human.
Yeah.
I don't know if they're like advanced also a little bit. Seemed like maybe, but
I think they were just humans, but like
very near automata in that way.
Like they have seems like they have exploratory missions where it's like one replicant and one Gestalt person.
Yeah. Not even near automata, just near, I guess. But I think they even use those same words.
Well, I think it's like Gestalt, like the meaning of it is like it means like a real natural person,
a real live boy,
a real boy.
But yeah, like it's funny how you're like, in the context of the universe, you're like a person opposed to the quote unquote evil empire, and yet everything your faction seems to be doing is also like shitty and evil.
Yeah.
So everything's written in like German and Japanese, which gave me vibes of like, I mean, I think you've said the developers were German, right?
Yeah.
But gave me vibes of like, is this like an alternate reality where Germany won World War II or something, and just everything is this?
It's possible.
I loved everything about the style, except I didn't like character portraits and stuff. I think it was just the simplification of the graphics, but they looked to me like DeviantArt, something like that, like drawing of a pretty girl or whatever. In terms of criticisms, I mean, too much with the inventory. I don't mind it because, again, I like that style of game, but like I spent most of my time just avoiding doing any combat and just running back and forth between chests.
I mean, it's just like if you want to have a weapon and ammo for the weapon and like a flashlight so you can see in a dark room, that's half your inventory right there.
Yeah.
So
it is. And it was a little silly because in the end, like you fight, you're like, oh, I gotta save up all my ammo, but like you can only carry a very small portion of it anyway, so you might as well.
I realized by the end I should have been just shooting more because
it would have made life a lot easier.
I had tons of ammo for every gun by the end.
But they made it viable to not, so.
But also like enemies return to life if you don't use one of the very limited
when I saw it's rare though. I saw a thing that was like, this will burn enemies and destroy their body. I was like, this is Crimson Heads from Resident Evil, which is a concept I don't super like. So anyway, if you like style and you are interested in survival horror,
very stylized, very cool,
and
game.
a good story,
fun enough to play to get
the like lore is interesting. I mean, it's a somewhat obtuse story, which again is appealing to me, but like just little things like notes you find in the world, like you and I were talking about the one that's like it's a mission between like a Gestalt and a replicant, and there's a note basically instructing the Gestalt like, hey, if things are looking bad and like only one of you can survive, don't destroy your replicant and like harvest their resources or whatever, because they're more likely to survive than you are in the long term. So maybe just let yourself die.
And maybe ask the replicant to help you die.
Right, assist you. So it's very cool. I would highly recommend. But let's talk about number 7, Matt.
Okay.
What is it?
Number 7, Proteus.
Proteus. With a D.
Talk to me about Proteus, Matt.
Proteus is a first-person shooter, very much in the style of Doom.
Yeah, not to be confused with Proteus with a T.
Which is a different game,
right.
Which is about like exploring a nice little
also a good
field and forest. Proteus, so the look is very, it's made in full 3D, but it has a very stylized, pixelated look, sort of like Signalis. And it just is really fun to look at, and you are exploring these weird sci-fi installations and dealing with incursions from another dimension and shooting a bunch of weird monsters.
You realize that every game we've talked about so far has been like sci-fi future?
Yeah.
That's interesting. And also like this is kind of like the year of the aesthetic, I feel like. There's only one game on this list that I would say is like super graphically impressive. But most of these have like a strong style, and Proteus is no different. It's kind of also got that throwback, like heavy pixelated. It's more of like the PC Doom look, obviously. Do you think the developers played Doom?
Probably. At some point.
Yeah.
Might have.
But to me, it feels like Doom. It feels like a throwback to Doom, old Doom, informed by new Doom.
Yeah.
And by that I mean like you go to fight a bunch of monsters and the music suddenly gets like more intense depending on how many are in the room with you and shit, you know? And speaking of which, like really good music, really good sound effects.
Yeah.
Like reloading the two assault rifles is just very like
yeah.
It's sick.
Fun weapons. It's fun to like look for secrets and explore and just blast everything.
And you get the sense that they want you to play this like super fast and like intense.
So like the thing is like you can find these checkpoints in the different levels, and once you found one, you will always respawn there without losing any progress if you die. So like dying is not really the problem. Like the goal is to get better and just like finish a level without dying.
Just blast through it.
Because you get a bonus if you don't. Like you score you at the end, and it's built to be replayed if you want to do that. But it's also just fun to play through once.
I love and it's actually, you and I were talking a little bit before this. I didn't realize you could like turn this off, but I love the sprite work that they did. Like, it's got that old PC thing where like a cloud of smoke or whatever will look the same no matter what angle you're looking at.
Like if sprite and how many corpses on the ground, you can rotate around it and it stays in the same position facing you.
But interestingly, they did like above sprites. So like if you look at like the enemies generally are sprites, and in old Doom they'd pretty much just be like, maybe they had a top down, but they'd just like be from the side, you know what I mean?
Yeah.
But if you look at sprites from above, they have an above sprite. So they did like a bunch of angles of it, but it still has that effect of like popping in when you rotate around it. I think if you like action games and like even new Doom, I would say like a new Doom fan would really like it.
Yeah, definitely.
So check that shit out, kids. But let's talk about number 6.
Number 6, Pentiment.
Not sci-fi.
Not sci-fi. Very much the opposite. Pentiment is an Obsidian game. It's set in the 15th century? 16th century?
16th century. Early 1500s.
Yeah. Germany, I believe.
Nope. Well, sort of, yeah.
Okay. It was like
at the time it was the Holy Roman Empire.
Yeah. And it centers around, for the most part, an artist doing sort of like a residency in a scriptorium in an abbey in a small town.
Yep.
And it's very well researched, historical setting, and basically the main thrust of the game is sort of solving. Would you think it's fair to say it's mostly solving some murders that are going around?
There's a murder and there's a conspiracy that seems to be taking place in this small town in the middle of nowhere.
And that's the main driving thrust of the story.
So a lot of time passes over the course of the game.
Yeah.
There's like 3 different acts, and each act takes place over like maybe like a week or 2, or some of them are longer. But anyway, like time passes between the acts, and so you see how the town changes over time.
Yeah.
As a result of these things that have been happening around you.
But it's a dialogue-driven.
It's another sort of like story-driven RPG.
Adventure game. Wouldn't you say? I mean, adventure. You're not collecting a bunch of shit, but you are playing around.
I was saying like RPG in the same way that like Disco Elysium is, where there's not combat and
sure there are those moments where they check your dialogue.
Like you make
ability,
choices about your background that affect the dialogue options that are available to you and what your character knows and what they don't know.
Yeah. And while I hesitate to say that it's like about a murder, it's more just like about the time period and the story that's revolving around the characters, and the murder is just the device that drives everything forward. I think without it, it'd be too kind of dry.
Well, yeah, I mean, the murders are definitely driving the story, but it's worth mentioning that, like, there's not really... You can't really solve the murders right away. You have a limited time to do your investigation, and, like, you can find multiple suspects who have...
You're just information gathering.
Like, they could have done the murder, but you don't know who really did it.
Yeah.
And so you're basically just making decisions based on what you know and how you feel about the characters.
Yeah, and I won't go into, like, spoilers per se, but, like, that is a big part of it, is, like, there's an ambiguity to, like, did you pick the right person? Right. You know, it doesn't come out and say, like, yeah, he was the guy. You know what I mean? It's just, like, you kind of have to live with it.
Yeah.
Do you like that aspect of it, or do you think they should have?
No, I do like it. I mean, they could have gone a different way with it and given you, like, real, like, fully solved mystery for you to figure out. But that's not what it's about. It's a game about, like, deciding who your character is and what's important to them, and, like, how you want to interact with this town and be remembered.
Yeah. It's, like, extremely well researched, I would say.
Yeah.
Like, I mean, in a way, I said this after I played only, like, the first hour of it, but I was talking to you and I said, like, feels a little like doing homework.
Yeah.
Just because, like, it calls out little, like, terms and stuff that you can look at and get more information.
You'll definitely get more out of this game if you have an interest in history.
Yeah.
Like, a big part of the game is, like, every day, you have 1 or 2 meals that you can go to, and, like, you just go to someone's house and eat with them, and you'll have, like, a period accurate meal and just talk about what's going on in their lives.
Yeah.
And I really like that stuff, just, like, experiencing life in a different century. And
it's an unusual, it's an unusual setting and, like, context for a game, I feel like.
Yeah, like, you don't really see games like this, so I thought it was really cool. As someone who has interest in history.
Stylistically, it wasn't maybe my favorite aesthetics of the year, but it has a really cool aesthetic, and some of the little details it does with, like, dialogue, like, everyone has, like, a scripty type language. The people who live in the abbey, like, the monks and stuff, have a much more evolved kind of script to their dialogue.
Yeah.
But then the people who are associated with, like, printing press have, like, their dialogue just, like, comes down in a big block, and it makes, like, a printing press sound. Just little, like, visual flares that, like, they didn't have to do that, you know?
Yeah, it all looks like the artwork of the time that this artist would be doing, basically.
Yeah. Yeah, very cool. I mean, again, I'd caution, like, if you don't like a lot of reading, it might not be your favorite.
I mean, reading games on this list, but
yeah,
that's what I enjoyed this year.
Pentiment even more so than Citizen Sleeper.
Yeah.
But Matt, talk to me about number 5.
Number 5, The Case of the Golden Idol.
This is a detective mystery game also, but this one is much more about actually finding the correct answer. Takes place in the 1700s, and the way it works is there's a series of murders, and in each murder, it gives you, like, a scene frozen in time, where you see, like, either the murder right after it's happened or some short time after, and, like, you see all the different people who are there, and all these different objects are highlighted that you can look at. And as you click on the objects or the people, you can see what they're carrying, you can see what's inside, like a chest or something. And as you're doing this, it's adding words to this word bank you have, and you use those words to identify all the people in the scene and, like, fill out a form basically explaining what happened in that scene.
I would say it's an Obra Dinn-like.
Yes.
That's fair. Did Obra Dinn invent that, though?
I mean, it's really, like, logical deduction is, like, a kind of popular... It's been a popular kind of puzzle.
But just this idea of, like,
time.
looking at a crime, like, or a death as it's, like, happening and freezing time, and just kind of, like, analyzing the environment.
It definitely feels inspired by Obra Dinn in that way. But
yes. Which, if I'm allowed to talk about Obra Dinn for a second, the day it was, like, a long weekend that I started playing Obra Dinn. It was, like, one of the best days of my life. So, like,
it's a good game.
So, like, just for being similar to Obra Dinn, I do love Golden Idol, and But you're right, it's not a carbon copy in that it does that thing where it fills like the word bank and you kind of have to drag them into place and say like, it gives you a little like Mad Lib of like what happened, and you kind of have to intuit like, this person stabbed this person because they were trying to you know what I mean?
Yeah.
I would say it has a unusual art style, if not downright an ugly art style.
It's definitely ugly.
Yeah.
But I kind of like it.
But ugly is not always a bad thing.
Yeah.
All the characters look like gruesome, you know. It's again, aesthetics are important this year, and I feel like this one has a unique style.
And cool thing about it is that like the story takes place over several years, and like each scene is actually connected if you pay attention, obviously.
Yeah.
And like you see this sort of dark conspiracy unfold over years as like these guys are killing each other over this strange artifact and its weird powers.
That's the thing is like, you know, you analyze the scene to find out what's going on, but you also can analyze like what you saw in the previous scenes to kind of figure. Like I knew after a while, like I could just say like, okay, I've seen this guy before. I know what his name is. I know what his deal is.
And that knowledge does help you.
Right. You got to pay attention.
Like, cause like, just knowing the connections between the characters already helps you some of the deductions you have to make.
Yeah. There's not a ton of it, but I thought the music that was there was good, and it fit like the vibe of like solving this gruesome murder.
Yeah, if you like detective stories, I think you'll
true detective stories.
It's just fun to.
Yeah, it reminded me of like a
make conclusions based on the evidence.
It reminded me of like an old paperback or something story that like young boys would read. I don't know, like The Case of the Golden Eye. You know what I mean? But anyway, it's very good. But enough about that. Let's talk about number 4.
Number 4, Norco.
Also sci-fi, dystopian. Although, okay, Norco is an adventure game. Classic, you know, kind of click and point, find items and use them on other items and get through the story. But it takes place in what year? Do you know?
I think it's modern day, but it's like an alternate modern day where technology developed differently.
Interesting. Okay, because I was gonna say it both feels like it's like hundreds of years in the future, but also things haven't really changed that much.
Yeah.
Which I would almost like is almost a criticism from me, but we'll get into it. Like things feel shitty. This reminds me of like Kentucky Route Zero in terms of just like bleak, you know, kind of painting American life as like kind of capitalist hellscape. Like they're in Louisiana, right?
Right.
And they talk about how much their town routinely like floods and the systems are breaking down.
Like Norco is a real place, I think, in the New Orleans area.
Oh, okay, that makes sense.
So yeah, this person who designed this game grew up there, and like they saw like how capitalism was destroying the neighborhood and the
environment.
And that's like what this game is about, like with a darker sort of sci-fi thing going on. Where, like
you play a young woman, I guess I say, returning home. Do you know your mom's?
Yeah, you're returning home because your mother just died.
Yeah.
And when you get there, your brother is missing. So you basically
the whole game find him.
You're looking for him.
Yeah. It's got kind of a dreamlike feel. Like the reason I question that is because like it is like dreamlike in a way, I guess, in terms of like who you meet and like how they interact with you and stuff.
Yeah, like your buddy for most of the game is this android
Million,
who is like owned by your mother and is accompanying you while you look for your brother. And there's all kinds of weird stuff going on in this game.
Wacky characters.
Like you meet this.
Well, just real quick, like with the Million thing, like that's a good example of it feeling like modern day and super in the future because you're just like going around a house that looks totally normal, and then you go to the backyard and there's like a weird android, you know, with like alien technology just chilling by a pickup truck.
Yeah, so like you're basically just exploring this alternate version of reality.
Yeah.
And experiencing the story, which like is another game this year which had a really good writing and just like it's really what the game is about. Like it is a point and click game with puzzles, but the puzzles are usually pretty simple.
Yes.
It's not a game that's trying to stump you, it's just wants you to experience the story.
I have an issue with a lot of point and click adventure games because they're just so obtuse.
Yeah.
This one, I don't think there was a single moment where I didn't know like, oh yeah, that's where that goes, or I know what to do here.
Yeah, it felt intentional.
Yeah. Also kind of a ugly art style. Would you say that's fair?
I mean, less ugly than Golden Idol, but
Sure. But people still look kind of like, not great.
I mean, yeah, but like that's what it's trying to portray as a place that has kind of gone to hell.
Yeah. It's weird as hell, especially like where the story goes.
Yeah, there's like a cult of guys who are, what's their names? Kevin?
No, Gary.
Gary. I remember the cult is named Gary.
Yeah, it felt very like timely. It felt very like like weird incel vibes off those guys and like MRA type, a following around some like YouTuber or something, like Andrew Tate Jagoff or something,
Yeah.
I don't want to go too much into where the story goes, but just a very interesting, well-written world, good world building, and it's cool.
Yeah.
Man.
Good game.
Good game.
Real good.
Gold. Matt, what's our number 3?
Number 3, Vampire Survivors.
Vampire Survivors.
Vampire Survivors. Talk to me about that video game.
Okay. Vampire Survivors is sort of, it's a roguelike run-based game. I would describe it as a twin-stick shooter, except you don't do the shooting.
Yeah.
It sort of happens automatically.
Does it for you.
It's very clearly inspired by like the aesthetic of Castlevania.
Mm-hmm.
So you'll just play this character on this giant field, and there are just enemies coming towards you constantly, and you have a simple weapon that
depending on the character you pick.
Yeah, the weapon changes based on your character, and it just goes off constantly, repeatedly. And as you kill enemies, you collect XP, and as you gain XP, you gain levels, and you pick new weapons, and you upgrade those weapons, and you get other passive effects that give you other abilities, and those combine with the weapons to evolve them. And as you play over the course of like half an hour, you turn from like a little guy who can't do anything to like
a little guy who can't do anything.
Death incarnate.
Yeah.
As like your attacks get bigger and stronger and faster, and
like the screen just becomes
a
nonsense that is
chaos.
Yeah.
Like you see numbers popping up everywhere, and you gain levels absurdly fast.
Mm-hmm.
And like you collect gold that you can use after you finish your run to
buy permanent upgrades.
Buy upgrades that make you even more powerful as you keep playing.
Right. So Steve described this to me as bullet heaven, which I think is an interesting term because the bullets come from you.
Yeah.
And just that, like, again, this is one of those games that, like, the first moment I played it, I was like, oh shit, I get it. And I was, like, instantly addicted. That's, like, the number one thing is this game is just very addictive.
It took me a little longer to get into it, but, like, once I got over, like, the hump, like, the 15-minute hump and realized...
Well, you're also not typically, like, a run-based guy.
That's true. But this one is, I think, good at...
progressing you.
Yeah, like, because, like I said, everyone is, like, half an hour, basically. So, like, you don't feel like you're... taking forever to get to the point where you're, like... actually good at it.
Speaking of like time wasting games, like if you ever need to just kill like half an hour, well, it's deceptive because the rounds last typically half an hour, but because of like evolutions and like other screens and stuff, it usually I feel like takes longer, like 40 minutes or something, whatever.
You can get to a point where you last past a half hour, and that's when you're really cooking.
Become God. I didn't like the art style at first, but after playing it, like. I get it. You know what I mean?
You need to be able to read it to see what's happening. So.
Exactly. Like, it kind of couldn't be any other way. Like, the amount of shit that is being, like, processed on screen by the end is
And, like,
absurd.
Just, like, one thing is, like, your weapon projectiles are all really pixelated.
Mm-hmm.
And it's useful because, like, one of the things you can do is increase the area of effect of your weapons. So, like, when you see that they're giant pixelated objects, you can tell, like, how much that effect is... I had
a thing that like it was a Arcana or whatever that like increased the area of effect of my stuff every level, and then I had like other increased size of it.
Yeah.
And I had the cat, which I don't really like the cat.
The cat can hurt you.
I know.
I hate the cat.
I know. I kind of hate it too, but I had it. And the cat like gets in like squabbles where it like makes big clouds of dust, and so everything was so big that by the end of the game, like my screen just looked like a bunch of dust. Like it was like impossible to see anything. But that's like, that's what you like. Like what I like about like Binding of Isaac is when you find the synergy that makes stuff just like ridiculous and puts you in like God mode.
Yeah.
Like the end of a round, if you're doing it right anyway, like you're in that God mode and you're just like, but crucially, I also find like you can be in God mode and the game still throws so much shit at you that you start to be like, oh shit, I might actually be in trouble here.
Yeah.
So it's just very like all I want to do is like keep playing it. It's just very addictive and it, for me anyway, like got me right in there. So
yeah,
it's a very good game. But enough about that. We're getting into the home stretch here. Matt, for the love of God, talk to me about the God of War, Ragnarok.
Number 2, God of War Ragnarok.
All right, this is obviously a sequel to the previous God of War game.
Yeah, no shit.
And it is a conclusion to the story that they restarted there. Where, I mean, Ragnarok is here. It's coming.
Oh shit!
You gotta find a way to survive it. You again play as Kratos, and like you're followed around by your son, Atreus, and you are exploring the 9 realms, hacking dudes up with your axe and your blades of chaos, and solving puzzles that your annoying son sometimes tells you how to solve too quickly.
Yes.
And it's really fun.
I feel like this is like a boring recommendation because it's like I have notes here. I wrote continues to have a good story.
Yeah.
Like it when I first started playing it, it almost felt like a reboot of 2018, if that makes sense. Like it started very similarly with like
it's very
Fenrir's dying and
very gradual
sad moment. Yeah. And also just like, oh, there's invaders in our home. What's that about? Oh, somebody's coming to visit us in our shack. We're in a big fight now.
Yeah.
But you know, good characters, good writing. Like I say it's a boring recommendation because like it's just a good game. Like everything's good about it.
It's just good.
Yeah.
It's not going to blow your mind if you play the last one. It's
a lot of the same I was going to say, does it?
I mean, it does add stuff as you play it, but like it's none of it is really shocking or game changing. It's just like if you enjoyed the last one and you are into the idea of playing more of it, then
I was thinking this is not really a spoiler. I mean, it's a spoiler for the first one, but Atreus is. I mean, should we say?
Go ahead.
I mean, if you're going to play this game, you're going to figure it out pretty damn quick. Is Loki, and there's implications of that. But it's just funny to me to think like in the first game, there wasn't really any indication of that because it was like a twist.
Right.
In this game, they're just like lots of green shit everywhere. He shoots green arrows. He's green. I don't know. Loki's been culturally coded as green.
I think it's a really fun take on Norse mythology. Like all the characters are well cast and well written, and their interactions are always like Richard Schiff plays Odin. Who's basically the main villain, of course, and he's like I don't know how far you've gotten. You haven't beaten it,
right?
Have you met him again since the first time?
I haven't.
Okay. He's just so much fun to have around. Like,
he's a fun guy.
He plays like. He's not overtly evil, but like he's just so clearly scheming and
manipulative,
smarter than everybody and manipulating everyone.
Yeah,
he's so good.
We talked about this a little bit. I asked, "Is God of War a Zelda-like?" And you said it always has been.
Yeah, I guess if you haven't played the old games, you wouldn't know that so much of them is like solving puzzles and like trying to figure out these large, confined spaces the same way as you would in a Zelda game. And that's still true in the newer ones. Like they don't have quite the same scale to those areas, but you're always like solving puzzles and
I think specifically about Zelda, like not letting you like jump off certain platforms and things like that. Like that kind of structure, and also just like we can't access this thing yet because we don't have the right tool to destroy it.
Yeah, they're not fully open world games. They're big games that let you explore a lot, but like they are kind of keeping you on a more of a path.
Yeah. The one other thing I'll say is that the writing and the triple A-ness of it all, they are very good at like tugging at the heartstrings. Because again, just in the intro, like I was like, all right, here we go again. I remember in the first game, it was a very somber intro because he's like burying his wife or whatever, or bringing her to the funeral pyre. And then in the beginning of this one, they're like tending to a dying, Fenrir, and I was like, once again, like, oh shit, the dog is dying.
Yeah, it's just a well-made game.
Yeah, exactly. And speaking of well-made games, we're going to talk about our number one game of 2022, to the surprise of maybe no one.
Neon White.
Neon White, let's talk about it. Elden Ring.
Number 1. Elden Ring.
Elden Ring, folks. Elden Ring. Somebody said, and I don't want to be hyperbolic, but somebody said Elden Ring is the game you want all other games to be. And what I think they mean by this is Elden Ring kind of makes good on this promise of like, hey, you see that mountain in the distance? You can go there. No, but it's just like it gives me that same feeling that I got playing Ocarina of Time for the first time and just being like, oh shit, the possibilities are endless.
Yeah.
You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Like me and my friends played it like co-op multiplayer, and we played on Discord, and we kept being like, oh shit, I found this thing today. Come into my game and I'll show you. And we would just like walk and like, look at this, go in this door, go in there, check out this very surprising thing that happens.
Yeah.
It's so gonna take a step back. If you're living under a rock, Elden Ring is the newest game from Software, developers of Dark Souls and Souls-like games, director Hidetaka Miyazaki. It plays like a Souls-like, I would say, largely Dark Souls style gameplay. So, third-person action
Dark
RPG.
Souls is obviously the biggest influence, but you can also like see bits of like Sekiro in there.
Sure. Maybe should have had a little bit more Sekiro, but we'll get into that. And Bloodborne and Demon Souls and all that good shit. But it's just, it's big Dark Souls in that it is a open world game. And you could say Dark Souls has always been like a little open world, but this is true like AAA
it's
style.
like a Zelda thing.
Open map. Yeah, exactly.
Like Breath of the Wild is open world in the way that previous games were not.
Correct. But it still has dungeons and everything, obviously. But where I think this makes a huge difference for, the Dark Souls formula is, and actually why I would recommend it to more people than I feel like other FromSoft games, is because, hey, you're bouncing off this one boss or you're bouncing off this just tough enemy, just go somewhere else, level up, and see what you can explore.
Yeah.
Like, they put the big tree sentinel, scary horseman, right at the start of the game, basically to cheat you that. Like, hey, it's okay to not fight this guy.
Right.
Because you're not going to be able to beat him.
And it's like always fun to go back later, like, maybe I'm ready now to fight him.
Yeah.
And then find out you are, and like, yes, I'm getting better.
Let me look at my notes here. I have a note that says Miyazaki stays winning.
Yeah.
And it's just like, I'm a huge From Software fan, obviously, and like I keep waiting for him to release a game that's like a dud, and it just keeps not happening. And this one, I thought maybe it's gonna be this one because I didn't know that the open world formula would like fit into it, and like everyone was hyping it up so much, but it met the hype for me and like almost exceeded it. Like, again, I can't stress enough that feeling of like just the surprising aspect of, so for a good example is like, oh, go into the wilderness. Okay, I'm going to use the same example that everyone uses, which is in the forest, towards the beginning of the game, you're just like randomly going around checking shit out. You find like just a elevator that just like seems to go down, and you just random ass elevator, you take it, takes you down. All of a sudden you're surrounded by like these weird cosmic walls. You can like see stars everywhere. There's no stars in the overworld. We'll get into that. Well, we won't, but it's a story thing.
Yeah.
And then you're just in this enormous, like, palatial underground cavern with all these weird enemies and shit. And it begins, or is at least part of, this giant side quest. And just that feeling of entering something that felt like a random little, like, oh, normally this would be like a cave that has a treasure chest in it, and having a huge part of the game underneath it, it instills you the feeling that, like, there's so much to find and discover in this game, that it's, again, that possibilities are endless feeling.
Yeah. Like it felt like there was a risk that the style of the Souls game just wouldn't translate to something that was this big, but it really, they nailed it. Like,
well, because I think the reason why is that Souls games feel so crafted. Like every hallway, you remember it, and like, oh, that monster hides behind that thing. And they somehow managed to, for the most part, scale that to an enormous world map.
And like they still have, like, you'll find the castles or fortresses or whatever. Yeah. That where you would normally find a typical Souls level, and those are still like as good as they've ever been. Yeah. And like there's the capital city in this game that is like the biggest dungeon basically they've ever done, and it's absurdly huge, and like you can go all kinds of different places.
Labyrinthine.
Like you can still like figure it out the same way you would a Souls level, but it's just so much grander than what they've done before.
Like Stormvale Castle, the first like major dungeon that you go to, like there's so much layering to the level design that like there were huge sections that I missed. There's one like really cool like lore implications, like giant face under a like huge like ladder. And I remember when I beat the game and started going online talking about it, like I just never encountered it.
Yeah. And there's these storylines like happening, like there's that guy who follows you through the castle that you might not notice it, but he's like screwing with you the whole time you're in there.
Yeah. It's got those little like Miyazaki details in there that like other games just don't bother with, which is like a blessing and a curse. Like the quest design does kind of suck, I'll admit, but like there's also something about it that is so unique to From Software and like so requiring of you to talk to the community to like figure out what's going on that is like endearing about it. Like it's not a good thing for quests to be so obtuse that you like can't figure it out on your own. But at the same time, I kind of like a part of that.
I mean, you'll find people who will tell you that that's just bad design, but like also like it works. Like people love these games and they like talking about them and trying to figure out together. Like how do I met this person and I want to know what they're up to, about know where they are. Where are they?
Yes.
Oh, they're over here. This is how you get to them. It's like, oh, okay, thanks.
And that's
also like, I think it's definitely a part of the intentional design of the game.
We're talking about aesthetics this year a lot. I think Elden Ring is a great example of aesthetics over traditional, just good graphics, because God of War is like a better graphical game. But there were so many moments in Elden Ring that I like entered a new area or just like stopped to look at something that I was like, God damn, that looks good.
Yeah, like every new vista they give you is really like just makes you stop for a second.
It's just, and like I remember people would complain about some of the graphics and screenshots. I'm just like, what are you talking about?
I did have a couple performance issues with the game.
Yeah, you did. You had like slowdown.
I'm not sure why. Like it just didn't run super fast on the PS5.
You play on PS5?
I did.
That's weird because we both did, and I didn't really get that.
I'm not sure what it was. But I mean, the game it never caused a big problem. And like, especially like
maybe they've fixed it by now with a patch. Hopefully, I don't know.
It was just sort of a bit choppy at places, but it was still looked great.
But like
overall,
I specifically had this recently playing God of War. Like I was going through a very nice looking area, like it was like beautiful, but I was just like running through it, and I had to force myself to like stop and just like take it in a little bit. Whereas like Elden Ring stopped me. Like I was like, shit, that looks good. And so it just shows the difference there. I'll say it's not a perfect game. I have
totally
dumb gripes about it.
In a game this big that you play for 100 hours, you're gonna find some things you don't like about it.
I guess that's the problem. Is like it's. I love it so much that like it almost hurts that there are things, especially towards the end, that I don't like. Number one being just enemy variety, and it feels bad to say that because there's so many enemies and so much in the game that like it feels dumb to complain about enemy variety. Like think about like a typical like Far Cry game.
Yeah.
How many enemy types are in that? Sub 10 probably.
Yeah, especially like, if you don't count like random animals.
Right. Whereas like Elden Ring has like shitloads. It's just towards the end they did recycle a couple like bosses and shit. It's very
actually like it's kind of a problem for the whole game where they recycle like because like you have repeatable dungeon types like mini dungeons, and those often have like the same type of enemies in them.
The same cat statue.
Yeah, you find that cat statue so many times.
They do put like a little stank on it.
I mean, they do change them around, but like you do get familiar with certain boss types for sure.
Yeah, so that is a gripe, but it's an understandable one, I think. Another one for me is just
this game would have taken another 3 years to come out if they didn't repeat anything.
I know, and they came out pretty quick, all things considered, with their last couple games. The other one just being the difficulty level. It's fine, but I'm one of those jerks who like prides himself on like beating the boss solo, and it's so hard with some of these fucking bosses. Because the game is tuned to summon people. Like, it just is. There's a new mechanic for summoning spirits that, like...
Which is a lot of fun for me.
It is, yeah, and you're supposed to do it. And I just have, like, a mental block about it.
Yeah, I understand that
to do it.
If you want to just prove that you can do it yourself.
Yeah.
Like, those bosses are not designed for that.
But I also think, and I think you would agree, that, like, Sekiro has one of the most, like, refined combat systems in a game.
Yeah.
And so to go from that to Elden Ring, which is, like, more based on Dark Souls, which is a much older game, it feels like it could have used like a parry system like Sekiro has, because the bosses are very fast, very intense.
Yeah, I think I think they wanted this game to have a broader player base than Sekiro.
Yes, sure.
But I felt myself like making like a 20-hour action game versus a giant open world.
Or even like Bloodborne, because Bloodborne's enemies are faster too, but you have that parry system. So it's just it felt like I missed the days of like Taurus Demon in Dark Souls. That's just he does one big attack and that's your opening.
It's not the best combat they've ever done, but it's one of the biggest, coolest things they've ever done.
Yes, and just also in terms of like lore and storyline, like once again, like just extremely good. Yeah. There's so much that like people are still discovering and making like video essays about it, and like I don't know that anything will ever grab me as much as like Dark Souls did, just because that was my first like foray into this world and his way of writing stories that like I found very intriguing. But you know, the Elden Ring has it too. Like there's plenty here to just like keep diving into and kind of uncovering for yourself.
Lots of cool stuff.
Yes. So anyway, would you say you recommended it? It's all right. So anyway, that's the top 10.
That's it.
You want to talk about any others that we maybe give some honorable mentions?
I really liked Teardown.
Yeah.
Which is a game where you were basically pulling heists by like manipulating the environment with your destructive tools.
You're tearing them down, if you will.
Yeah, you're basically trying to create the best route for the level so you can pull off your job and escape in a timely fashion. It's fun.
Cool. I didn't get around to playing Sifu, but I was recommended it. Maybe I'll play it and I'll make it an old game of our 2023 list. Also, I tried to play the new Call of Duty, who my friend Steve works on. So shout out to him. But my graphics card needed to be factory RMA'd or whatever, so I just got that back in. So we'll see if I can play Call of Duty now. But I tried, and I failed.
Is that cross-platform?
I think so, yeah. And I think with auto aim, they're actually having a problem because like console players are too good now. Used to be the opposite. But anyway, so I'll play that. And then any old games of the year?
I did play Super Mario World.
It's a classic.
That's the first time I played through it. I played it before, but this is my first time going all the way through it.
Is it any good?
It's good. It's a good game.
You still haven't played Mario 3?
Yes, I have.
You have?
Yeah.
When did you play that?
A couple years ago.
You old bitch. Mario 3 is good.
Yeah.
I think Super Mario World is better though. I don't know.
I like it.
It's tough.
I like it more.
I don't think I have any old games of the year. I can't wait till. Imagine the game that's going to come out the week or month of Horizon 3.
Yeah, that game would be good.
That's going to be one of the best games of all time.
Yeah.
Horizon was fine.
Horizon was fine.
I liked it.
I enjoyed it.
Yeah. Well, anyway.
Pretty.
That about does it, folks. Stick with us for the next one.
See you next year.
See you next year.
2024, not a sci-fi year.
Yeah. Maybe
normal year.
Next year. What is it going to be? Prediction. What is it going to be? What's the theme of next year or this year?
The theme of 2023?
Yeah.
Maybe there'll be some good expensive games this year as opposed to 2022.
Yeah, because this year sucked.
2022 is the year of indies.
I love it. All right. Goodbye, Matt.
Goodbye. Forever.
Y'all come back now here.